Here tonight, we always take the minute or two to introduce everybody up here on the dais so people can properly understand everyone's role. So I'm Glenn Clark, I'm the chairman, so good evening to everyone. And over here, we got a couple new faces, so this is going to be perhaps a little difficult for me. To your right, my left, at the end is Michael Bossenbrook. Did I say that right?
That's right.
Okay, well, yay for me, right, to get it right for the first time. He is a freshly new appointed member of the Zoning Board of Appeals, so congratulations to you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We're excited to be working with you here in the future. Then this gentleman here is Aaron Green, and he's an alternate, which has been appointed by the City Council. So he sits when there isn't, if a person who's on the board can't be here, which was the case tonight, and so Mr. Green will serve as a fully voting member of the board here tonight. So welcome, Mr. Green. First time meeting you, so thank you for coming. And this is Vice Chairman Dan Agawas, and I already introduced myself. This is Mr. Eisenbacher, this is Mr. Desmond, and this is Mr. McCauley. So those are the voting members of the board tonight. We have a full board tonight, so we will be able to properly conduct business according to state law. On the side over here is Mr. Evans, who is with the city administration. So he will serve as our staff advisor from the city administration here tonight. And then that's Mr. Motsney on the very end, and he is by day assistant city attorney, but he will serve as the board's legal advisor here for all of our proceedings here tonight. So that is the end of the introductions, and I will ask Mr. Evans to officially call the roll.
Mr. Clark.
I'm here.
Mr. Agawas.
Here.
Mr. Desmond.
Here.
Mr. Eisenbacher.
Here.
Mr. McCauley.
Here.
Mr. Green.
Here.
Mr. Bossenbrook.
Here.
So we do have quorum to conduct our affairs here tonight legally, and we're going to proceed with the procedure. So I'm going to call on Vice Chairman Agawas to read our rules and procedures. So this is done for the exclusive purpose of alerting people how we operate as a board. So he's going to share some information.
The Zoning Board of Appeals is a group of 7 of your neighbors appointed by City Council to decide on requests for variances and other matters that are brought before them. A variance is a relaxation of the literal provisions of the zoning ordinance. Petitioners must indicate a hardship or practical difficulty with the land that would warrant the granting of the variance. The board will hear the items in the order that they appear on the agenda. When an item is called, the chairman will verify that the petitioner is present. Then the city administration will summarize the facts of the case. The petitioner will then be given an opportunity to address the board to explain the justification for the action requested. After the petitioner makes their presentation and answers any questions that the board may have, the chairman will open the public hearing. Any person wishing to speak on the request should raise their hand and, when recognized by the chairman, come up to the podium. The speaker should identify themselves with name and address, indicate their relationship to the property in question, such as next door neighbor, live behind the property, etc., and state whether they are in favor of or against the variance request and give reasons for their opinion. Comments must be directed through the chairman. Comments should be kept as brief as possible and closely pertain to the matter under consideration. Only one person will be recognized by the chairman to speak at one time. At the conclusion of public comments, the chairman will close the public hearing. Once the public hearing is closed, no other public comment will be taken unless in response to a specific question by a member of the board. The board will then make a motion to approve, deny, or postpone the request. In order for the request to pass, a minimum of 4 votes are needed. If the request is not granted, the applicant has the right to appeal the board's decision to Oakland County Circuit Court.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Agawas. And we will now proceed with item number 3, which is the approval of the minutes for the February 19th meeting. That sounds like it was a long time ago, doesn't it? We haven't met in a couple months. So if there is a member of the board who has any questions, concerns, comments, or if someone would like to offer a resolution, I will entertain that now. Mr. Green.
I move that we approve the minutes of February 19th as printed.
It's been moved by
Second.
Green and seconded by Eisenbacher for approval of item number 3 as presented. Any discussion from a member of the board? Hearing none, Mr. Evans, we're prepared for a vote.
Mr. Bossenbrook.
Yes.
Mr. Agawas.
Yes.
Mr. Desmond.
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbacher.
Yes.
Mr. McCauley.
Yes.
Mr. Green.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes. So that's approved. Item number 4 is approval of the agenda as presented. Are there any concerns about the agenda that was in our packet that staff made available to us? Mr. Evans?
The agenda version that was in your packet actually had the wrong year. That's been corrected for tonight. So it said May 21st, 2018. So I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. That was noted as a typo, and we've corrected that for tonight's meeting.
I see that now. No wonder I felt deja vu a little bit. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Mr. Eisenbacher?
I will move the agenda as presented.
Second. Mr. Desmond seconds that. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Evans, we're prepared for a vote.
Mr. Desmond?
Yes.
Mr. Bossenbrook?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbacher?
Yes.
Mr. McCauley?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Agawas?
Yes.
Motion passes. So we move right along to item number 5 related to Mr. Dodarian's property at 6738 Emerald Lake. Mr. Evans, can you please present to us on this matter?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and this is regards to property on Emerald Lake. This is in a residential area in the Emerald Lake subdivision. That neighborhood is located west of John R. and south of South Boulevard. I have it circled on the overhead here. I've zoomed in a little closer to the neighborhood, and the property is on the southeast side of Emerald Lakes, just off the corner of, well, I can't read that side street from here, but it's one property in, and it's also outlined. And there's a close-up of the subject property. Now, this is a proposed site plan for the property, and it is rotated 180 degrees. So we have the street at the bottom of this version. And the owner is proposing to enlarge the garage, and that would be to the right side of this diagram. So it's this area here that I'm motioning to. Now, they've indicated that the setback, as proposed, will be 8 feet from the side property line. They've also indicated that on the other side of the property, the existing setback is 10 feet. Well, the city code does allow as little as 8 feet on the side. When you add both side yard setbacks up combined, they must equal 20 feet. The proposal calls for a combined side yard setback of 18 feet. The applicant has provided elevations as well to show how the completed product will look. I'll turn it back over to the board for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Is there a member of the board who'd like to inquire of staff about information that's been presented? Okay, we're going to ask our petitioner to come forward now. So what we do is we ask that you identify yourself and mention your relationship to the property in question for the official record.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Derdarian, and I'm the property owner.
Related to,
I'm sorry.
just mention, go ahead and mention the property.
Oh, 6738 Emerald Lake Drive.
Very good. So why don't you share with the board what you want to share?
Well, I guess I would ask if there's any questions about what we've proposed. No? I did have one additional item I wanted to bring forward, and that is we took the same plan to the Emerald Lake Restrictions Board. They reviewed it, they approved it. We have it signed by the restrictions chairman and the association president. So can I give you a copy of this?
Yeah, if you pass it over here to the end, and then each board member can, if you don't have multiple copies, we'll all take a look at it, and then it'll end up with city staff, and it'll be part of the official record.
Okay. And basically, Mr. Evans explained what we're trying to do. We want to add a third bay onto the garage, and it'll just be off to the side.
A third what, I'm sorry?
A third bay onto the garage.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yes. Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Is there a member, well,
Oh,
please,
sorry.
hold on. Is there a member of the board who'd like to inquire of this petitioner? Mr. Green?
I see on the plan that there is not a huge, but a buffer between the original 2-bay and this new bay. And I'm wondering if that buffer is more than 2 and some change feet, and if it would have been possible potentially to, or it would be potentially possible to scale that piece back, because assuming that the goal is to get the classic car in the garage,
Right.
that would still allow for that, and possibly then remove the need for an easement.
Can I ask Mr. Rockensus, because he's been working with this?
Is he a vendor?
He's construction. He would
Oh,
be
sure.
doing the construction.
You
So-
can come up and,
Okay.
Just make sure that you please identify yourself.
My name's Roy Rockensus, a contractor. I live in Troy, and I live in the same subdivision that Mr. Duderian lives in. There is approximately 32 inches roughly there. It's not a lot of room, and the front end of the building isn't the concern, it's the back end. If we shrunk it down to 8 feet, it would be very small to be able to fit a vehicle in an 8-foot section. The front, as you can see on the print, it's 17 feet across the front. So it's more the back end that's the question, not necessarily the front end. It keeps the line going with the property line if we ran it, the same parallel.
Can I follow up?
Sure.
So to that point, absolutely. But if you leave the back at 10 and then sway inwards, you do lose that exact line to the property. But then you save the 2 there, and it looked like at the back there was actually enough room. I don't have it in front of me. So how does that? The car has to go right in. If you move the 2 feet over, you still get those same 2 feet. And if you sway inward at the front, you lose a little bit, but you still have enough room for the vehicle. It is tighter, but if the goal is primarily storage, then.
You're talking about leaving the back end 10 feet and shrinking the front?
If you remove some of that 32 inches, if you remove 24 of the 32.
Well, the 32 that I thought you were talking about is on the front, is what I thought you were talking about.
You just can't speak away from the microphone. So if you want a reference, and then go back to the microphone for the public record.
So those 24 inches, yes, I was speaking of those, but then at the back, I see a similar. You'd lose that back door out of the garage.
Right.
But you'd still have the space for the vehicle, and that would eliminate the easement requirement.
It would be tougher, though, because if you pull in straight on the double door on the left, you're almost right near there already to the one edge. They never made those garages in the subdivision very large. I've done other additions in the subdivision where they have made larger garages. Obviously, we need to meet the subdivision guidelines, but they were barely 20 feet by 20 feet on most of those. And it's mainly, it's a very tight squeeze. As it is right now, I think they back one car in and pull the other one in just to get out. It's a very tight squeeze. We're just trying to make it more usable, and he's planning on, obviously, I think he's doing it for future vehicle. Obviously, he wants to park in there.
Thank you.
Mr. Eisenbacher, did you have something?
Yes, we received a letter from a neighbor who has put his house on the market. Do you know if that house has sold?
It hasn't. As far as I know, it hasn't.
Okay, so the sign's still in the front yard
Yes.
next door?
Yeah.
Okay, that was my only question.
Any other member of the board? Okay, if you can, please, Mr. McCall,
My hand's a
please.
little slow today. Question. I'm looking at this, and your yard's very small to begin with, and you're going to take more of your yard away, even so. And for a 3-car garage, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so okay, that's all I want to know. You're looking at taking more yard away, which you don't have much of already.
Well, the front's the largest portion, and it's a odd-shaped yard. If it wasn't the pie shape that it was, that back corner actually is within a few feet of actually meeting the 12-foot setback that would be needed for a 12 and 8 combined. Literally, the east side of the back corner is what's really given us the problem from getting our proper 8-foot setback on the west side of the property. It's mainly due to the pie shape and the way it's positioned on the lot. And we've run into this with other houses that we've had issues with because they're trying to maximize houses on the bends and curves and everything. They, unfortunately, some of them have better benefits and some of them there's negatives to it.
Mr. Green.
It looked like it from some of the pictures, and I did go by and was able to confirm. It would appear that in addition to the pine or the spruce, the evergreen that would have to come down for this, the additional shrubbery and a small patch of garden there would likely also have to.
That will not be touched. The garage comes across right where the jog is on the back of the, right next to the number 6 there. That's where it would come straight across. So the shrubbery is not in the way.
Okay.
It's mainly the pine tree and unfortunately with the pines it's the blue spruce that has that blight, so it's going to have to come down sooner or later.
Any other member of the board? Mr. McCauley.
Have you looked at drainage at all?
Never had an issue with the drainage. It's a sandy area. The whole subdivision was built on a gravel pit originally. As far as water, there's not an issue.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're completed in our questions and dialogue with you, so if you can have a seat, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to call on Vice Chairman Agawas to share with us any communications that came in on this matter, either electronically or in written form.
Sure. Mr. Eisenbacher referenced this letter already. It's from the homeowner at 6730 Emerald Lake Drive, which I believe is on the southwest side where the proposed construction would take place. He has 2 concerns. He's just put his house up for sale. He personally thinks that, well, he's against the request, saying that it would detract from the aesthetic quality and curb appeal, but then he would also be concerned about the incoming potential buyer. He originally wanted to postpone this meeting, which didn't happen, but had more concern about the incoming buyer as opposed to himself.
Okay, thank you. So is there a member of the board who'd like to be recognized to inquire of staff or to have any discussion, or Mr. Evans?
Did want to open public hearing?
Yes, we definitely want to do that. So at this point in time, it's been a little while, so I'm sorry. We're going to open the public hearing. So if you are a member of the public and would like to address the board on this matter, please step to the podium and you will be recognized. If you're a member of the public who would like to speak to the board on public record on this matter, please proceed to the podium and be recognized. Please identify yourself once again, please.
I'm Roy Rockensus. Again, I live in the subdivision. In reference to the address at 6730, this is a residence that has been a rental property for the past 12 to 15 years. The homeowner that sent the letter hasn't even lived there in that many years, and I think if it wasn't for the fact that his house is on the market, he wouldn't have had an issue whatsoever. I don't know if it's in reference to the construction that would be going on or in reference to the variance. He didn't really state why he would be against. I mean, he said because of the potential new homeowner, but he didn't state whether he was against the variance or the addition itself. That's all I wanted to make clear.
Just want to be crystal clear. If a member of the public wants to communicate with us,
Right.
they have a right to their opinion.
Oh, I understand.
And you can come and share your opinion about what you're advocating for. I don't think it's very appropriate to try and interpret what the other person stated. But you have that legal right to be at that microphone to state that. So I just wanted to be clear. Any other member of the public who would like to address the board, please step to the podium and be recognized.
I did want to mention that.
Please identify yourself, please, once again.
My name is Stephen Derdarian, and I'm the property owner at 6738 Emerald Lake. I did try to speak to Mr. Auer about his concern, because I did hear about it ahead of time. He really didn't want to discuss it. to say? His major concern did seem to be that his house was for sale on for sale. And so I tried to come up with a compromise or see if we could come to some agreement. And I suggested, would it be all right with him if I held off starting construction till July 1st? And again, he didn't want to discuss that. So I did try to make some effort to address his concerns. That's all I wanted to say.
Very good, thank you. Any other member of the public who would like to be identified or recognized to be speaking on this matter to the board, please step forward. Final call.
No.
That's the first time in all my bazillion years of being on this board that 100% of the audience participated on public comment. So congratulations, young lady. Could you identify yourself, please?
My name is Lisa Derderian, and I live at 6738 Emerald Lake Drive. I am the property owner as well, joint property owner. I just wanted to say I have talked to two of my neighbors, and they were on board with our decision to expand our garage. I also wanted to mention the neighbor at 6730. I think it's like Mr. Rockensus had mentioned, it had been 10 to 12 years since he has lived there. We've had different renters at that property. And the only time I know that he was going to be having a new renter come in because he had the landscaper come and cut his shrubs, and he doesn't do anything else. It's like every 2 years, 3 years when someone changes. So I'm just stating that if he's not that concerned. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other member of the public who would like to be recognized on this matter, please step forward to the podium and be recognized. Final call, and we're going to close out the public hearing, and we're going to bring it back to the board table for discussion, comments.
Just looking this up on the MLS, I just want to bring it to everybody's attention. It's not incredibly relevant to this, but it's been brought up. The property at 6730 Emerald Lake Drive was marked pending as of yesterday, so it is under contract. So does not seem that this, by the time construction starts on that this would be relevant to a purchaser because it currently is under contract. So
thank you.
Just letting everyone know.
Thank you. Any other member of the board? Yes, sir.
I have a quick question about, in the statement of practical difficulty, just a mention about due to a sidewalk setback, there's an inability to, I guess, bring this new addition forward. Can I just maybe get a better understanding of what that is referencing?
That would be an inquiry of Mr. Evans.
Was this in?
It's in the packet. I apologize that was submitted.
Was that something the applicant said, or?
Yes.
Perhaps, since the applicant wrote that, I think it'd be safe to defer. Do you want further clarification as to what the applicant meant?
Yeah, actually I would, yes.
Sure. Let's recall the applicant, please.
You want my name again? Okay.
I think we're okay.
Okay. What I was referring to is if I could have taken the whole third bay of the garage and moved the whole thing forward, the property line would be moving away from that corner. So I would get 2 feet by going forward. I would get the additional 2 feet. But then it would be too close to the sidewalk. So I couldn't do that.
Okay.
Okay? Yeah.
Anything else, Mr. Bossenbrook? Okay.
No, thank you.
Very good. Any other member of the board? Mr. McCauley?
I went out and looked at it, and I have concerns. I have concerns when we take our open space area and we use it for non-open space purposes, especially when they're for personal use. Not something, this is a luxury item, not a mandatory item or something that you would expect. And with the size of that yard, even though it is pie-shaped and the majority of the pie is in the front, the ability to put that on is only because it's pie-shaped. That's not a deterrent. So I look at this, if this was a standard yard, would we be able to do this and would we approve this? I would say no. I don't think this is something that I would approve because it is too close to the property line. We've had people come to us before with other items that were houses that were built too close to the property line that they had to get variances for, and painstakingly they had to go through all kinds of hoops to get that. I think that the advantage of this being in a sense reverse pie gives them that opportunity to build this. If this was a standard lot, that wouldn't happen. I just think I look at it from the neighbor's point of view. If I was a neighbor, I wouldn't be happy having something that close to me. Because if he needs to get into the backyard, how's he going to access his backyard? For equipment, for anything, it's just not going to have the space to do it. So, to me, I don't see a need for it.
Mr. McCauley, do you want to make a motion?
No?
Okay.
Chairman?
I'm sorry, Mr. Bossenbrook was next, so please proceed.
Just very briefly, I think I want to just continue on that thought. First of all, I know in the first criteria we talk about exceptional characteristics could be an irregular shaped lot, but in this situation it seems like, as was said, it's sort of the opposite. This extra stall is actually in a portion of the property that's not constrained by a narrower part of the property, but actually it's perhaps the wider part. So I don't think that based on what I've seen that the first criteria would support granting a variance. And I guess the second point I would make is I'm not entirely convinced that there aren't perhaps some adjustments to the plan that could bring it within that 2-foot requirement to get the 20 feet total. So that's in that sense I'm leaning against the variance request.
Okay, Mr. Eisenbacher.
Looking at the drawings and the packet prepared by the petitioner, it appears he put a lot of effort into the thought process and the layout and the execution of this proposal. And this does fit our definition of a very odd-shaped parcel. That whole subdivision is our odd-shaped parcels because of the way the lakes and the gravel pit were there, and then it was a subdivision developed. So I see most of the criteria very easily met, and then as stated in the petition, like for example, A, the exceptional characteristic is the irregular shape. B, the characteristic that makes compliance is related to the premises. C, it is not a personal nature, it's just an expansion of usable space in the house. D, it was not created by the current or previous owner, it was created by developer when they laid out the lot site shapes. And E, when you look at those, the other properties nearby, it's not putting it inherently closer compared to how the R1D layout is in that neighborhood. It is a tight neighborhood. Because of how the plans are laid out where it is not just a tacked on garage, I don't believe it's going to unreasonably diminish or impair property values or hurt the health, safety, comfort, morals, or welfare of the inhabitants of the city. Looking at the site plan, the other side of the house does have a 10-foot setback that would allow for putting equipment in the backyard if tree trimming equipment or whatever excavating for drainage pipes were needed. I don't see where this is an unreasonable request of the board. If there's no objections, I see no one else jumping forward. I'd make a resolution to, oh, okay. One more.
Mr. Green?
Yes, thank you. I was actually just looking at the shapes of things, and for the most part, I would actually say that things are fairly regular. I agree that the pie shape is actually beneficial in this case for the most part. Looking at 6730's abutting property line with 6722. This would still leave them with some way to get stuff in the backyard, although I don't know from recollection or from the image how much space they would have given the tree at the front, but that might still allow for it. In driving around, I was looking for 3-car garages or more unusual structures. Truly, they're not uniform, but I found only one other residence in that general neighborhood that was fairly unusual, which was like a combined bungalow with a garage underneath at 6245 Walker, where there's a 2-in-1 garage that goes like this, where you pull in here and you pull in here. And that is the only time that I found something comparable to this. That doesn't mean we should deny it on that basis, but this would be unusual for the neighborhood. And while the difficulty isn't precisely of the homeowners making this does impact a luxury piece of things as opposed to the residential space. So I'm on the fence.
It's at the board table, so I'm sorry, we're concluded with the public comment for that. Unless a board member, generally our policy is if some board member wants to recall a petitioner, we give them the right to do that, but we're discussing, so this is important business we're doing right now. I would just say, having heard, I've heard some very good arguments from several members, a couple of brand new members, and I think Mr. McCauley was persuasive as well. I just have to put myself in the shoes of being the property owner next door. Would I want an infringement towards my home, towards my property of a garage? And I can't say that I do, but I do understand that anytime we deal with a piece of property that's irregular shape like that, we deal with a whole set of issues. I think maybe Mr. McCauley said that, and I don't want to put words in your mouth because maybe somebody else said it, perhaps this can be redone. I don't know as far as the contractor's ability to present something else. I'm not sure. I'm leaning against, folks, I'm sorry, I'm leaning against voting against any possible resolution giving you what you want. We have to protect the public's interest, and that's why we're here. But I'm not sure where my colleagues are going to be on these votes. I've heard a number of them. A couple seem to be leaning against it. I don't know until we have a hard vote. I'm not persuaded, and I know it's not a lot of space that you're asking for, but we have to look in the general public's interest as well. So I'm not sure. I think Mr. Eisenbacher is about to make a resolution. It kind of sounded like that to me. So we'll see where the chips fall. That's why we're here. Mr. Vice Chairman Gauss?
Well, since it feels like we're playing with an open hands here, everyone's talking about how they're thinking. Initially, when I read through the petitioner's request, it seemed like a slam dunk. It seemed as if the property had exceptional characteristics because of the pie shape. And it seemed like it fit nicely between A through E of all the criteria for practical difficulty. And after hearing some of the people that had concerns on the board and some of their information, I'm honestly not persuaded against that initial opinion that I had. I think if Mr. Eisenbacher does make a motion, I'd be ready to second it.
Is there a member of the board that would like to be recognized? Mr. Eisenbacher.
I will make a resolution to approve the variance. Let me see the address. At 6738 Emerald Lake Drive.
Second.
Motion for approval in a second.
Oh, we weren't there yet? Sorry.
By Eisenbacher Desmond for approval of the variance request. Is there any discussion? Any further discussion? So we've had some already. Seeing that there isn't any, we are going to proceed with a vote. Mr. Evans?
Mr. Eisenbacher.
Yes.
Mr. McCauley.
No.
Mr. Bossenbrook.
No.
Mr. Green.
No.
Mr. Clark.
No.
Mr. Agawas?
Yes.
Mr. Desmond?
Yes.
By my count, the resolution fails, and you can speak to Mr. Evans during regular business days or hours during the week about any changes, proposals. We are not the city of Troy. Mr. Evans works for the city of Troy, so that's going to be at a different time. But we appreciate you coming, and I think that your information was presented in a very positive light, so thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. So we are moving right on to communications. Mr. Evans, do we have any?
We do not.
Okay, and I know that we got handed a couple handouts, the Michigan Planner and the Planning and Zoning News. Super exciting reading, I'm sure, we can.
Most definitely.
Right, we could dig into later.
Yeah.
Then we end up moving right into item number 7, miscellaneous business. So this is regarding the election of officers. We have a couple new folks at the table. So the way this works is we have 2 officers that we will be electing here tonight. One is the chairman, one is the vice chairman. It's the board's preference based on whatever resolution somebody brings forward. We can take both positions in one vote, or we can bifurcate them and take 2 separate positions. It really is essentially if somebody wants to offer an initial resolution, usually how it goes, to have 2 people elected, and then somebody just wants to vote on one because maybe perhaps they don't like the second one or they think somebody else is better, then that kind of just pretty much breaks that resolution up. But at this point in time, any member can make any resolution related to the chairman and the vice chairman. I do know that the alternate is not able to be elected because you rotate onto the board. And perhaps we're going to see you a lot, Mr. Green, so hopefully we will. So is there a Mr. Eisenbacher?
Since we missed so many meetings, it makes sense that we would just continue with Mr. Clark as chairman. Now I'm having a brain.
Is this a motion?
This is a motion. Make a motion to approve Mr. Clark as chairman and Mr. Hagawas. Wait, where am I seeing? As vice chairman.
Second?
There was a motion by Eisenbacher. Who was Mr. Desmond was the second? Okay, so it's moved and seconded for Clark and Agawas to be chairman and vice chairman. Is there another motion that someone would like to make of any sort?
I don't know if this is the appropriate time.
Mr. Green.
Thank you. Since I am not familiar with everybody on the board, I'm certainly not going to vote against anybody, but I'd be curious to hear more about both of your backgrounds as to whether I just abstain because I know nothing or vote yes.
I will let Mr. Agawas go first, because he's a very impressive gentleman.
Oh, sure. Well, as far as the ZBA board, I've been on the board for about 2.5 years. Last year as vice chairman. My background is finance and math, although I probably do a lot of litigation support work in the financial field, which is probably a big tangent that we don't need to get into. But I guess the direct experience would be the 2.5 years on the ZBA board here.
And I've been on this board, I don't even know how long, a very long time. So there were some wonderful people on this board years ago, and they told me within a year, you need to become vice chairman. And so I basically became vice chairman, like literally within a short amount of time, kind of like Mr. Agawas. It's been a long time. I have a lot of experience. I work really well with the city staff, this city attorney's office. We are under litigation now, which I don't know if you knew that. And I feel that everything that we did followed the zoning law and Michigan law. I'm very compliant with the Open Meetings Act, and I always remind my fellow colleagues on the board that we can't communicate as a quorum outside this board table. So I've been very diligent in that. I'm a publisher. I have a magazine that I publish here in Troy. I also represent other magazines in the Southeast Michigan area. I also do other things. I do consulting. I've done consulting, organizational consulting mostly, for many years. And I just finished a stint, 7.5 years long, which was a long time, with the Michigan Attorney General's Consumer Education Program, which was part of the Consumer Protection Division. So I was the top presenter for the consumer education programs for many years in the whole state of Michigan. And I mostly spoke to senior groups about identity theft, phone to mail scams, e-scams, investment fraud, things of that nature. So, and I've been in Troy, I think officially since 2000, but I've really lived here since 1994. So, yeah. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Does anybody else want to be nominated for this position? If you think you could be a good chairman, just speak out. I'm really happy to do it. I enjoy being the presiding officer here. I think I work really well with everyone involved, and I try to pay a lot of respect. I know that we sometimes have votes that mean that we disagree, but it's very agreeable, and I think that anyone's been here for a while would agree with that. Anyone else would like to be recognized? Mr. Evans, I believe we're prepared for that important vote.
Mr. McCauley,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Clark,
Yes.
Mr. Bossenbrook,
Yes.
Mr. Gauss,
Yes.
Mr. Desmond,
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbacher.
Yes.
Congratulations, Mr. Gauss. It was an impressive campaign that you ran. So at this point in time, we move right on to public comment. If there's a member of the board who'd like to be recognized, please, all right, a member of the public who would like to be recognized about anything that's not on the agenda, they can come to the podium and be recognized at this point in time. Someone would like to be recognized to speak on public comment, please present themselves to the podium. Final call for someone from the public to speak on public comment. Seeing that there isn't anyone, we'll close that portion out. I'm just going to bring it back to the board table real quick. Is there a member of the board that would like to address anything at this point in time? Seeing that there isn't, we are adjourned at 8:12. See you guys next month.